And that's eventually how we got to Lucy Hale, who stars in the film, and that's then who gave us the ability to get the film made, because her name has value, and then it becomes an actual kind of a real thing. And so,
what is a proof of concept short film?
A proof of concept short film is basically making a short, or it could be something even like a teaser or a trailer, but basically showing what you can do and what you want to do in the feature version. So in my case, I had written this feature script that I wanted to go make, but I had made this first feature when I was 17. I was now, 34 at the time when I was trying to make this feature. And I didn't really have any kind of recent narrative work to show. I had been making commercials for the last almost 10 years, but a lot of that isn't really transferable to narrative storytelling in the same way. And so I knew I needed to basically prove, not necessarily to myself, but to the people that were going to fund this film, that I could make this film. And a lot of people were telling me that too. And so I decided to basically make a short film kind of inspired from my feature that would show the style and the tone and kind of the vibe I was going for, and then showcase my filmmaking as a director. And so I think that is super important for young filmmakers, because unless you have a whole collection of really great short films, and even if you do, if it's a different style or tone than the feature, a lot of times people just won't have the faith that you can do that, right? And that's a separate issue. In general, Hollywood probably should have a lot more faith in people and take some more risks, but unfortunately they don't. And so you really kind of have to prove to people that you can do this. And so for me to get my feature off the ground, it was essential to have made this proof of concept, because it was probably a 12, 15-minute long film. I had taken kind of a character from the feature and wrote a kind of backstory for them. And it wasn't a scene from the film. It wasn't a teaser, but it was kind of like almost a prequel to the feature, of kind of an origin story of one of the characters in the feature. And so it could be its own standalone thing. The nice thing about doing that way is it could be its own short. It could live on its own. Even if the feature never happened or did happen, it could still exist. It wasn't like a teaser or a trailer or something like that. It was a full film, short film. But it was totally in alignment to the feature in terms of the cinematography, the pacing, the kind of acting, just the whole style I was trying to create, and showed that I could pull off these scenes, And it had a little bit of action, but it kind of showed the kind of my ability as a director. And it just opened up so many more doors in terms of people don't want to read scripts, everyone has a script. Even if you're just good, they still don't want to read it probably, because they don't think it's good. And so, but if you can show them, if you can send them a link and show them a 12 or 15-minute short film that's compelling and has some talent to it, then they'll be like, okay, that's actually pretty good. Actually, I will read this script now. And then that's what kind of started to, for me, build more and more opportunities for getting my feature made, was then people would watch the short and then they would read the script. And I also had like a deck that I went with along all this, where it was like, it was my kind of vision and take for how to make the movie in terms of breaking down the cinematography, the music, the editing, the same kind of skills I learned from making commercials, where you have to kind of make a treatment or a pitch for why you should direct a commercial. It was that same kind of thing, but for my own movie, of like, what it would look and feel like. So together, that was kind of my package I would send to people. And I didn't have any agent or manager, or barely knew anyone. I was just kind of taking any kind of connections and relationships I did have and seeing where it could go from there. And it took a long time. It took several years, and eventually someone would get it and they'd pass it on to somebody else. And in my case, a producer saw the short, really liked it. Then he read the script, he really liked that. And he brought in his casting director that he works with all the time. And together they were able to get the script out to some of the bigger agencies. And that's eventually how we got to Lucy Hale, who stars in the film. And that's then who gave us the ability to get the film made, because, her name has value, and then it becomes an actual kind of a real thing. And so none of that would have happened without this proof of concept short film.
So was the backstory about, was it Ellie? Is that her character?
No, it was one of the other characters. It was the Guillermo. Oh. It was the guy who, it was the character who in the feature is living in the U.S. and receives the drugs that come via this ultralight airplane into the U.S. But in the short, it was kind of how he got to the U.S. He was the guy flying the plane in that case, but kind of has to take over. He has to basically kill the guy and replace him and take over and be the permanent guy and leave his family behind and be that guy in the US now. And so it didn't really have a story connection so much to the feature, but it just had that kind of world connection and that kind of tone connection and everything like that.
What comes first, a proof of concept short or a screenplay?
I think the screenplay would have to come first, because without the screenplay, a proof of concept would just be making a short film, a regular short film, which is fine. You could use that still to help your career and build you the next thing. But really the point of a proof of concept is to show that you can then make this kind of style or this kind of film that you're trying to make. And I'm talking about in this situation, if you're a writer or director like I am, where I had written this script and I knew I wanted to direct it. I didn't want to just have someone else make this. I wrote this really in order to direct it. And so, yeah, I think it always has to start with the script. And maybe if you have made enough short films or something similar style, you wouldn't have to do that. But for me, I just hadn't made anything narratively in so long that I just really needed to show something to people. And also, I knew I could make this, but I knew that to be able to go out and pitch this, I needed to be able to show that I could make this kind of film and that it could be really great. And it was so essential in order to have gotten the film made, I think, to have had this.
And so it was the story of Guillermo, not Ellie, who's actually the protagonist in the film. And where did you film the proof of concept?
So the proof of concept we filmed in like Palmdale, Lancaster area. The feature Borrego is set in the Anza Borrego Desert in Southern California, and so was the short. But to film out there is a lot further, more expensive. So for the proof of concept, we filmed it all in Palmdale, Lancaster, which is closer to LA. It's kind of the closest kind of desert you can get to from about an hour or so drive from LA. And that's where we shot it. I think it was 2 or 3 days shoot. And, I obviously called in lots of favors. But I think it is important with the proof of concept that it still has to look and feel as real as possible. So if you can't wrangle together the resources to make it compelling and professional, I think it's probably not worth doing. It's better to kind of find something that you can do, because for me, I think it's, of course, they don't expect it to look like $1 million movie, of course, but it still has to kind of be able to look and feel kind of what you're going after. And in my case, the film needed to be this very polished, kind of traditionally shot kind of film, slower kind of dolly moves and, things like that. And so we needed to shoot on really nice cameras and put as much resources as we could into it. And so it's always that balance, because of course that costs money and most people don't have that. So you have to either find that money somehow, call in favors. I kind of did all the above. I got a few people to believe in that project who gave me a little more money, and then I called in tons of favors from all the people I'd hired over the years to make commercials and had worked for me, and so together I was able to put together something that looked really nice, looked really high quality, but was made for not very much money. And then I was able to eventually get the film made from that.
And are there rules on the time length of a proof of concept?
No, there's no rules, but I think the general thing with short films is the shorter is the better, because especially, well, for two things. One is for festivals. It's always easier to get a shorter film program to do a festival, because there's only so much time there is in a festival screening block, right? And if your film is 30 minutes long, that's a really big chunk of time. You could put, a bunch of other shorter films in that same amount of time. And so one is, if you want to get into festivals, I think shorter is always better. And then two, if you're trying to get executives or financiers or anyone like that to watch your movie, if it's shorter, again, they have shorter attention spans. If it's shorter and compelling, I think it's always going to be stronger. So I think mine was 12 or 15 minutes. It's probably the longer end of things where you'd want it to be. But in my case, I was trying to show a couple different styles of scenes and filmmaking, so I needed it to be that length. But in general, if you can keep it short, I think it's always going to be an easier sell for people to watch it.